So you've been sitting at your desk all day and now you're ready to go out for your walk or your run or your cycle, but you want to make sure that you are all warmed up and ready to do so. So let's go ahead and get you there. We're going to start with the shoulders by just lifting them up towards the ears and letting them smoothly drop down towards the floor. Again, do that a few more times. And it might be nice to take a deep breath in as you lift them up. And then exhale as they release down. 2 more times. Now imagine that your hands have either been sort of at your sides like this, maybe you were using your mouse all day or your keyboard. So let's just get those wrists and hands moving. Start by flicking your fingers down towards the floor as if you had water on them and you were trying to flick that water off of your hands. Nice, powerful flicking going on. And then flick that water out to the sides. And then flick it up towards the ceiling. Flick your hands towards each other. And then back towards the floor again. Back towards each other. Might be beginning to feel that burn in your forearms. Back up towards the ceiling. Out towards the sides. And back towards the floor. One more time. Going up. Going up. Going in. And going down. Good. Shake them out. Give those shoulders a nice little shake. Take your gaze over towards your left shoulder, down and around in a nice big circle until your gaze is at your right shoulder. Bring it back up to the center, over to the right, and back down and around. Let your left ear fall towards that shoulder now, and give it a little roll till your right ear is towards the right shoulder, and back through, giving it a little roll. One more time each side. Come back through to the center, and then we're going to roll down. So you're going to imagine that you're peeling the back of the skull away from a wall. Feel the back of your neck peel away, your shoulders, your mid-back, and your lower back. Nice big deep breath in. You're going to bend the knees and you're going to come all the way down onto the mat. Nice and graceful, just like I did there. All right, so now that you're here at the floor, you're going to take hold of the backs of the knees. Nice big deep breath, and as you exhale, you're going to start to roll down. Let your feet come along with you for the ride until they're up in the air. Then take a big breath here. Exhale and begin to peel your spine away from the floor again, sending your feet down towards the ground so that you can restack the spine and come all the way back up. We're going to do that again. Let your arms open up first. Keep your feet on the floor for as long as possible. Feel how you're peeling your way down towards the ground, and then the feet will just come along with you. When they can't stay there anymore, you'll end up with your feet in the air and then send them back down towards the ground so that you can restep back up. And again, rolling down. Deep breath in. Just start to send your hands into your legs into your hands. That'll give you some of that resistance and pull to come back up to sitting. And again, coming down. This time we're going to stay here. You're going to let one foot come down to the floor and then allow the other. Go ahead and put the arms down by the sides. Feet are going to be firmly planted into the ground. And you're going to start to peel your way up into a bridge. Nice big deep breath in at the top. And then exhale, slowly releasing down from the breastbone all the way through the back of the body until the pelvis releases too, tips down towards your toes, back up towards your nose, and you're peeling back up into your bridge. Nice big deep breath. This time let your arms just come up and rest ever so slightly back behind the back of the head. And release down and away. And then let the arms come back down, tilt the pelvis down towards the nose, back up towards the sorry, back down towards the toes, then back up towards the nose, all the way up and away from the mat. Take your arms with you. Nice big deep breath, exhaling down. Arms release down by the side. Let's do that one more time. Really allowing for every spinal segment to get a bit of movement. Deep breath in, exhaling all the way down. Let your arms just rest onto the mat out by the sides, in a place that feels comfortable so that your shoulders aren't coming away from the floor. Shoulder blades can just rest nice and comfortably into the mat too. Bring your feet all the way together, knees all the way together. You're going to let them tip over to one side. Stay here for a little bit of time. Maybe your gaze falls to the other direction so that you can feel all that space you're creating from your hand, your fingertips, all the way through the rib cage, through the waist, through that top knee. Few breaths and maybe you can feel that that top knee can just have a sense of growing a little bit longer here. Your fingertips growing longer in the other direction. And then with your next exhalation, you're going to drop the ribs behind the armpit down. Feel how that allows the other ribs to follow. Your waist follows, your knees follows, and you go on over to the other side. Gaze might just drop in the other direction. Don't feel like you have to force the head to move here, but it might be nice just to feel how the spinal rotation comes through all the way from the pelvis up to the tip of the head. And then drop the ribs underneath the armpit down towards the mat. Waist will follow, knees will follow. Let's go back to that first side. Nice big deep breaths to move. Get a little bit of rhythm going here. Enjoying that delicious rotation through the whole spine, guided by your breath. Last time to that side. And then rest through to the center. You're going to bring your arms up. Nice big deep breath in and then extend them up and over the head. Begin to lengthen your legs out. Nice big deep breath in. You're going to flex both feet, so it's as if you're standing onto the floor beneath, or the wall beneath you. You're going to reach your fingertips up and over the head and begin your full roll up here. Stretching up and over your toes. Rolling back up to a nice seated position and then all the way back down onto the mat. Don't worry too much here if you are getting stuck. Think about reaching with your feet towards that wall and using your arms to pick you up and over your legs. Reach them forward over your toes. Restack the spine in the center and then slowly peel back down. Feeling that segmental movement that you just felt in your bridge position. One more time. Up and over. And then come up to seated. Going to take your feet a little bit wider now that you're in your seated position. For this one, it might be quite useful to sit onto a book or a small block here. So what you don't want to feel is like you've got a lot of tightness at the front of the hips there. So just come to a place, either sat on a block or not sat on a block, maybe your knees a little bit bent, where you can sit up nice and tall and really feel your sitting bones right underneath you. You're going to take your arms out wide to the sides, take a big deep breath in, and as you exhale, begin to rotate around to your right side. And then inhale back to come to the center. And then rotate around to the left. Inhaling back to center. Now what I want you to check in with here is that it's not your hips that are doing the rotating. The way that you'll notice that your hips are doing the rotation for you is if your feet are kind of doing this sort of thing. See if you can keep your feet in the same position compared to each other as you rotate around. So now, as you're exhaling, rotating around, make sure your feet are staying in the same place. Rotate back into the center and then rotate around to the other side. This time, as you rotate around, I'm going to have you find a spot on the wall. Notice where your gaze ends up on this spot that you're looking at. Take a deep breath in, and as you exhale, we're going to see if you can move those lower ribs along and allow your gaze to maybe just go beyond that spot to somewhere further behind you, and then come back to the center, around to the other side. Find that little spot on the wall as you prepare to take that big deep breath in. Exhale, let your lower ribs rotate just a little bit farther. Notice your gaze can go a little bit farther on that wall, and then back to the center. We're just going to do one more rotation to either side, pausing for that deep breath. Seeing if you can get those lower ribs just to rotate a little bit farther around. And then last time to this side. And back to center. Just give those legs a little shake out. You're going to come to now lying onto your right side. Being nice and aligned with the back of your mat here. Elbow, hips, and the soles of the feet with your knees bent. And your hand firmly pressed at a diagonal away from you into the floor so that you can really pick up those lower ribs and come into a really nice position of the spine. Top hand is going to come onto top hip. You're going to extend your top leg out and just begin a little kick forward and back, keeping it really, really small. As your foot comes forward, go ahead and give it a flex. Point it as it's going back, and I want you to feel how you get this really lovely opening through the front of your hip as your leg goes back. And then swing it forward. Point the toe as it goes back. Flex the foot as it comes forward. Again, just really emphasizing that length that you're getting as you open up the hip. Make sure your bottom ribs don't drop down as you're doing this. Just going to do that twice more. And then pause in the center when your foot is directly underneath you, and we'll do 8 little circles forward. So 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, then reverse. 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Bend that leg, give it a little tap. A round of applause for all that good work that it's just done, and then go ahead and roll over onto your belly. Hands are going to come down by the rib cage with your elbows up towards the ceiling, and just like we did when we were in standing, we're going to let the shoulders come up towards the ears and then just let them glide back down the back. So they're lifting up towards the ears and then gliding back down, sliding as if there was a lovely bit of grease or soap all sudsed up on those shoulder blades, allowing them to move really freely here. Maybe you'll feel that your elbows help you to do a little bit of that work. Really moving freely around. And then plant those hands firmly into the floor. Get your legs so they feel like they're reaching away to open up the front of the hips and firmly plant them into the floor in front of you. And then begin to just allow the elbows and the shoulder blades to glide away as your chest peels away from the floor. Gaze comes to just in front of you towards the top of your mat. Nice big deep breath. And then lower all the way back down. Really let the elbows and the shoulders drive this movement up. Feel how your lower ribs stay lovely and connected into the floor so that those top ribs can open and fan away from the mat as you come up, and then you peel back down 3 more times. last time. And then go ahead and press yourself back into a child's pose for a moment. Take a little breath, keeping those hands firmly planted into the floor so that your palms feel active, your armpits stay active. And then we're going to go ahead and do the other side for your legs. So come now to your left side. Elbow is going to be in line with your hips, in line with your feet. Going to place that top hand on the top hip. Make sure those lower ribs are picked up away from the floor. And then lift that top leg so that it's hovering above, straight in above the bottom leg. And then begin to just swing it forward and back. So let's flex the foot as it comes forward and point the foot as it goes back. Really seeing here if you can keep your torso from going along for the ride. That's why I told you the first time to keep it nice and small so that you're not doing this kind of thing as your leg is moving. It stays relatively still to what your torso stays still to compared to what your leg is doing. Get 3 more of these to go. Feeling the front of the hip. I feel it more on this side than I did on the other. Don't know about you. And then you're going to pause when you come back to that hip height and start to do 8 circles forward. 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and reverse. 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Bend that knee. Give yourself a little pat. And then go ahead and roll back onto your belly. This time your arms are going to be up and over the head. So what we're going to do here is get to that sense again of the legs really being pulled out behind you. So the front of your hip points feel like they stay nice and firmly planted into the floor. They're not going to go anywhere here. Then I want you to see what it feels like to really reach your right leg out and away, and your left arm out and away in opposition to that. So you might feel a little lift up and away from the floor, and then release those limbs back down. Try the other side. So you're reaching out with your fingertips. You're keeping your hip point connected, but reaching out with your toes and feeling that lift of the thigh away from the floor, and then release back down. Back to the first side. Now, because your hip points are connected, you shouldn't feel any of this in your lower back. With the arms, I don't want you to feel like it's your shoulders coming up towards the ears that's allowing for your arms to move. Really feel that the reach is coming from those fingertips and out. Okay, when you've done that a few times on each side, go ahead and pause. Take a deep breath, and as you exhale, see if you can now lift all 4 limbs away from the floor at the same time. Gaze will be lifted away as well. You've got just an ever so slight lift of the chest. And then we're going to see what happens when you go for a little swim. So begin to pulse your arms and your legs as if you were swimming through the water, and you're breathing. 2 more breaths. Rest down. Press yourself back into your child's pose for a well-deserved break here. We're going to stay here for a moment, and you're going to walk your hands over to the right side. Get a lovely little stretch out through the left side of the body here by feeling your left hand planted down into the mat, and your left sitting bone just releasing towards your left heel. And then walk your hands back to the center, over to the other side. Couple of deep breaths, letting your right hand now plant down And your right sitting bone just release towards your right heel. And then come back to the center. Bring yourself forward so that you're placing your legs in what we call a Z position or a mermaid position with your right foot up against the front of your left thigh. Just going to release those hips a little bit by mobilizing them around in this seated position. So what you're doing is taking your hip from this position of being in sort of what you were sitting in all day long to really opening it up. So see if you can pick up that femur bone using your bum and send it forward. So it's not, notice it's not my upper body that's doing that movement for me. It's really a movement driven by my hips, driven by my pelvis. And then sit back down into it. So depending on how much sitting you're doing, this could feel quite easy or quite difficult. See how that is for you. And then we're going to stay with that open hip position. You're going to now encourage your ribs to move around, your chest to move around. You can use your arms and take your gaze around as far as it can. So you get this lovely rotation again. And the crown of your head out through that knee. Nice big deep breath in here and then come back around. You're going to plant your right hand down onto the floor. Use it as a little kickstand. Take your left hand up and over. Might get a little bend through that right arm as you reach the fingertips now up towards the corner of where the ceiling meets the wall above your head. Make sure the shoulder isn't coming along for the ride here. And then reach with the hand to come back up and over with the right hand. And then do a little swaying movement here. As if you were a seaweed in the ocean being pulled by the waves. Feel the opening up, the fanning of the rib cage as you move side to side. Good. And then pause in the center. Keep those arms up. We're going to move the legs around. Let's do that a few times actually. Just to get those hips really moving and mobilized. Notice I'm not really shifting the position of my pelvis. I'm just shifting the position of my legs and my hips. All right. And come to a place where your other leg is in the front. So your left leg is now up against the right knee. And we're going to encourage that right hip to open and then sit right back down into it. Do that a couple of times. On this side, maybe you'll notice one side feels completely different to the other. What really helps here is to have that whole front of the foot and ankle open too. So just check in with that to make sure you're not kind of blocking this movement. If you have a flexed foot, sometimes that can really hinder how much movement you get here. So just check in with that. This time you're going to keep the hip open. You're going to let your ribs turn around with you. Take your arms, take your chest, and take your gaze around. It's really lovely opening up. Flaring of the ribs around in a rotation. And come on back. I'm going to plant your left hand down, let your right hand come up and over the head. Nice big deep breath, really reach those fingertips up. Not over your head, but towards the corner of the wall, so that you're not kind of just leaning as far over as you can. The goal and the aim here is to let these ribs open. They've been closed all day long. Give them some space to breathe and to open. And then reach with that arm up and over. A few times, just fanning back and forth. Good. One more time, either side. And then come back around to being on your hands and your knees this time. Gonna go ahead and just open up your ankles so that you can sit back towards your heels. Walk yourself up so that you're kneeling there on in a low kneeling position. Back onto the open ankles to really give them a stretch out here. You're going to take your arms back behind you. Doesn't really matter which way your fingers point here, but I want you to feel like you can get an open shoulder. And then what you're going to do is start to open up the hips. So I don't want to just see that your pelvis is lifting away from your heels. I actually want to, it's a little, almost like a sense that you had a bowl on your pelvis that you wanted to tip back toward you. That movement's going to come from really kind of lifting through the top of the thigh. So imagine that you had a little bowl that you wanted to tip with the top of your thigh to start to get the front of the hips to open here. Nice big deep breath and then release that. Do that 3 more times. Lifting up through the top of the hip to tip your tiny little bowl and then to lower it back down. Keep the gaze up, keep the chest lifted. Last time here. And then lower that back down. Move your hands back around. We're going to tuck the toes. Reach your hands back now onto your heels and see if you could do the same thing here with your toes now tucked in this position. You might come up a little bit higher and then lower down. Really feeling like your little bowl is going to be now tipped over the edge. Do that 1 more time, and this time we're going to see if we can hold it here for a second and really invite the front of the hips to open a little bit more. Keep that gaze right straight in front of you and see if you could maybe ask the shoulders to open a little bit more here. Try not to let your ribs flare out too much in this position. You're opening up through the hips. We're not squeezing into the lower backs. Nice big deep breath. And then slowly release that down, release the shoulders, release the arms. Come back to the center of your mat so you come into your low kneeling, low squatting position. Fingertips just lightly planted onto the floor and then straighten out and stretch the backs of the legs. Maybe just patting the feet a few times to encourage the hamstrings to have a lovely little stretch out here. So emphasizing that the torso isn't moving, it's just the legs moving as your heels lift to pat out your feet. And then pause in the center, give everything a little bit of a shimmy out. Take a deep breath, and as you exhale, you're going to start to feed your upper body into your lower body, starting with your abs, then your ribs, then your shoulder blades and the tips of your shoulders, your neck, and then your head, all the way to the tip of the head so that you come into one line. Nice big deep breath, and then peel away from your imaginary wall behind you again to roll back down. Maybe the knees will bend a little bit. Maybe you want to have a final shimmy out, shake here. And then straighten out the legs as you feed yourself ever so slowly back into your feet, your knees, your thighs, your pelvis, all the way up to standing until you arrive here again. Might be nice to come off the mat so that you can lift up through the heels, bend the knees, lower the heels, and then straighten the legs twice more. Make sure the weight stays into the ball, the big toe side of the foot. Last time. And then you're going to reverse that. You're going to bend the knees, lift up at the heels, straighten the legs, and then lower them down 2 more times. Good, last time. Excellent. Give it all a little shake out. And that's you all ready to go on your cycle, your run, your walk, whatever it is after a long day of sitting at your desk. Thank you very much for joining me for this video.